I've got must start and sit running backs for week 10 of the fantasy football season. We will go through all 14 matchups, all 28 teams. At the end of this video, we will have talked about 60 plus running backs for fantasy football this week. Keep in mind that the Chiefs, Rams, Dolphins, and Eagles are all on bye, so you won't have Isaiah Pacheco, Raheem Mostert, DeAndre Swift, Darrell Henderson, Royce Freeman, like you were going to start those last two anyway, but there will be some running backs unavailable to your rosters this week. Now, there's also a breakdown here if you want to quickly pause and look at the terminology that I'll be talking about throughout the video. Okay, the first matchup we're going to talk about is Thursday Night Football, and Amazon Prime, again, pulling out all the strings to get us these superstar matchups. The Panthers at the Bears. The battle for the number one pick, essentially, even though the Bears have the pick. So do they want to win or lose this game? I'm not really sure. But this is Thursday Night Football. The over-under is 40.5 points. Chicago is favored because someone's got to be favored and the Bears are at home. Now, if Justin Fields plays this game, it could look completely different to if Tyson Bagent is playing this game. But let's start there with the Bears because this is a very complex backfield to look at this week. The matchup, if you look at the matchup alone, it is a beautiful matchup. This is the best matchup for fantasy running backs. No one's giving up more points than the Carolina Panthers on a per game basis. The issue is, how do we decipher this backfield? Khalil Herbert was, at the time of recording this, I don't know if he's going to play, but he was placed back on his window to come back. He has 21 days from IR to come back. And if he plays in the game, it becomes very, very confusing. So here's what we're going to do, guys. We're going to look at two scenarios with the Chicago backfield. This is how we're going to play it. The first scenario, which is the easiest scenario, is that Khalil Herbert does not play. If Khalil Herbert does not play, you can start D'Onta Foreman with confidence. He dominated the backfield last week. He played 39 snaps out of 67. The second highest running back was Rashawn Johnson with just 20 snaps. So Deontay basically doubled Rashawn's snaps last week. And if you look at carries, Deontay had 20 carries compared to just 2 for Rashawn Johnson. D'Onta Foreman absolutely dominated this backfield. He was playing the majority of early downs. He got most of the short yardage work. So if Khalil Herbert does not play, it makes things super easy. You can start D'Onta Foreman with confidence. In the scenario that Khalil does indeed play, that makes everything extremely, extremely messy. I have to then put D'Onta Foreman in the spot start category. And the reason is the last time that Khalil Herbert and Rashawn Johnson were both healthy in this backfield, D'Onta Foreman was a healthy scratch. He did not play. Now, I think he's earned a role for himself, but there's also a scenario in which he goes right back to that guy who just doesn't get many opportunities. They focus on Herbert and they focus on Rashawn as a future of this backfield. So if Herbert is active, despite it being a great matchup, I don't think you're really going to know who you can start. So if Herbert's active, Rashawn Johnson's a sit regardless. But if he's active, both Herbert and Foreman become spot start options, meaning that you can play them if you're in a tough position, but most people probably have a better option. If that's a three-headed backfield, that's just going to be really messy, even though it's a very good matchup. So that's how we're playing it this week. Go ahead and drop a comment. Tell us what situation you're sitting in. And if you are watching this video, go in the comments and help someone out down there. Make some good decisions this week. But as far as the Panthers side of the ball, Chuba Hubbard is a spot start for me. The matchup is great, and he has absolutely dominated in the last 3 games. So you can start Chuba Hubbard in any 12, 14, 16-man leagues. The issue is, and the reason why he's not a must start for me, is he's had really good opportunities in the past 2 games, and he has not converted that into good fantasy days. In the last 2 games, he's averaging 19.5 opportunities a game, and he's playing 65% of the snaps. The issue is, again, it hasn't been a good fantasy day in any of those last 2 games, scoring under 10 PPR points in both of those games. However, again, unless you have a clear better option than Chuba Hubbard, you can start him and get a little bit excited about a good matchup in a player who's getting a ton of volume. As far as Miles Sanders go, look, he could absolutely reclaim this backfield. He played really well last week, but again, not a player that you can start. And overall, I feel like 80% of people probably want to avoid this matchup on both sides because of how much uncertainty there is. My most confident start here would be Deonta Foreman if Herbert doesn't play. Now, if Herbert plays, it's just so messy, guys. Someone's going to have a great game. I just could not tell you who exactly that's going to be. All right, moving on to the next game, the second matchup. This is the Germany game in Deutschland. The Colts at the Patriots. What do you guys think about these games? I know some people have been telling me that they love it. Some people have been telling me they hate it. I'm not a huge fan just because of the time. It's a 1:30 a.m. start for where I am. But this game is in Germany. We saw the Chiefs and the Dolphins last week in Germany. But this has a 43.5 point over under. The Colts are favored. And as far as the Colts, this is very, very simple. You can start Jonathan Taylor with confidence from here on out. We've been saying that since about week 6. You can start that guy into your lineup. He has slowly but surely taken over that backfield. Every week, his snap percentage has gone up and up from 15 to 42 to 50 to 61. Last week to 74% of the snaps. I mean, he is dominating this backfield now. In the last 3 weeks, he's averaging almost 20 total opportunities per game. And that has led to Zach Moss being an irrelevant player in fantasy football. We've been encouraging you guys to sell him ever since JT signed, and it took a little longer than we expected, but Zach Moss has moved into the completely irrelevant category. Last week, he played 21% of the snaps and only had 7 opportunities. So Zach Moss is not a guy that you can start anymore. As far as the Patriots go, Ramondre Stevenson is the only guy you should even consider starting here. He's been pretty inconsistent. However, since week 6, Ramondre has been more involved specifically in the air as a pass catcher. That is where he makes his money in fantasy, is what he does in the air. So that is giving him a better weekly floor. So you can, excuse me, words are hard, have confidence to start him, but definitely not Zeke at this point. He has scored over 10 points one time this entire year. That's not someone that you really want in your matchup. Okay, we will now move on to the 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time slate of games. And we are starting off with a very, very good matchup. The Browns at the Ravens, an AFC North showdown. The AFC North division is ridiculously good this year. No one has a negative record. Everyone's over 500. So this will be a very important game as these AFC North matchups kind of start to unfold. Browns at Ravens, it's a 38.5 point over under. I thought that would be higher. I expect a little bit more points than 38.5 points, but okay. Ravens are favored at home. It makes sense. And as for the Ravens, look, Gus Edwards, I did not label a must start this week. I believe if you're in an 8 and a 10-man league, Gus Edwards is not considered a must start. But if you're in a 12, 14, or 16-man, you are likely putting Gus Edwards into your lineup. Firstly, we need to monitor his health throughout this week. He only had 5 rushing attempts last week when they played the Seattle Seahawks. The good news, if you started him, is 2 of those 5 rushing attempts went for a touchdown. Okay, so over 60 to 70% of his points came from those 2 rushing touchdowns. Now, the issue is we don't know if he's going to be healthy. The second issue is this is not a very good matchup against this defense. The Browns are 27th in points allowed to running backs in fantasy. This is a very, very difficult matchup. And we could see a scenario where the Ravens have alternate plans specifically in the red zone. Maybe they're aware that they can't run the ball as effectively against this defense, and they change up their game plan. And if Gus Edwards doesn't get into the end zone, all of the games he's not seen a touchdown, it has been very bad for fantasy. In fact, every game that he has failed to score a touchdown has been under 7 PPR points. So I know 3 weeks in a row where he has been incredible, averaging over 20 PPR points. But this matchup is not friendly. The volume wasn't there last week. And there is some concern as well that Keaton Mitchell could develop a larger role as we go on. I mean, we heard Harbaugh, the head coach there, talk about the fact that it's going to be a 3-headed backfield. We already do not want to hear a timeshare. You make it a 3-way timeshare, and that makes things very, very difficult to project. I'm not starting Keaton Mitchell. This is why I said on my waiver wire video that even if you pick this guy up, I'm not blowing all my fab because you can't even start him this week versus the Browns. He doesn't have a very good matchups, on the way. So look, here's how I'm approaching that backfield. Gus Edwards is a spot start, meaning you can start him if you're in a tough position because he has been getting the goal line opportunities. As far as Justice Hill and Keaton Mitchell, I do not want to start these players. Now, if you want to get a little crazy on Keaton Mitchell, go make a DFS lineup. Go check out the link in our description, the pinned comment. Go play underdog and do some pick'ems with Keaton Mitchell. But I don't think you want to start him in fantasy. So that's how I'm approaching the Ravens backfield. As for the Browns, things became very, very clear for us here in week 9. Jerome Ford finally healthy, and he dominated that backfield. 64.3% of the snaps and 27 total touches. Now keep in mind that they dominated that game versus the Cardinals, so they really didn't need to do anything other than run the ball. But Jerome Ford looked like the guy again as he was healthy, and Kareem Hunt on the opposite hand went back down to 29% of the snaps, which is not what we had been seeing from him in the last couple of weeks. Now, Kareem still scored a touchdown, but I would say Jerome Ford is the only must start in this backfield based on the percentage of snaps that he's playing and the amount of touches that they just gave him. So you absolutely can start Jerome Ford with confidence. And, it's not a good matchup either. I totally hear you guys, but Jerome Ford is my most confident start in this game. And as far as Kareem Hunt goes, you can start him. He scored a touchdown in 4 straight games. But depending on your options, I would say most people have, 90% of people actually, would have a better option than Kareem Hunt. All right, the fourth matchup we're going to look at, that was a lot for that matchup, but I want to be as detailed as I can. The fourth matchup that we're looking at is the Texans at the Bengals. 47.5 point over-under. The Bengals are favored at home. This is the second highest over-under of the week. And Vegas is telling us the Texans can go out and put up some points, and we like to hear that. But unfortunately for the running back position, I do not see any starting option in this backfield. If Dameon Pierce plays, or even if Dameon Pierce does not play in this game, I don't want to start anyone. Devin Singletary last week versus a tough defense played 75% of the snaps, and he had under 5 points in PPR. Dameon Pierce hasn't been better either. Both of these guys have been wildly inefficient. No one's been able to really score on the goal line. This is just not an offense that has any attractive running backs, and I'm labeling both of them must-sits, even though the Bengals are middle of the pack against running backs. Now, as far as the Bengals go, this is very, very simple. Joe Mixon, you start him with confidence. I know there's been some people who have wavered in their faith on Joe Mixon. Us on this channel, we have been telling you to buy him, and it's really starting to pay off in these last couple of weeks. He is a fine running back that was on a bad offense. Guys, this offense was one of the worst offenses in the first 4 weeks in the entire NFL. When Joe Burrow got healthy, things really turned around. You're able to extend drives. Now you're able to have more scoring opportunities. And a guy like Joe Mixon, who is dominating touches, finally has a chance to get into the end zone. You saw that in the last 2 weeks. That's why we went out and told you to buy low on him for multiple weeks. And it's the good thing is volume has always been there for Joe Mixon. He's averaging 19 and a half touches per game since the bye week and 19 points per game in fantasy. So you can start him with confidence in a good matchup. The Texans are a top 10 matchup for running backs. All right, the next matchup, this is going to be very simple. 49ers at Jaguars. It's a 44.5 point over-under. Honestly, I thought there would be a higher over-under for this one too, but maybe I'm misreading that. Now, here's something that's important. The Niners are favored, even though it's at Jacksonville. So this will be a huge game for the Jags. If the Jags can win this game, I think they can tell us they are serious contenders. Now, the 49ers, they get Chase Young for the first time, so that will be exciting for them. But as far as the running back position, there's not a matchup out there that is easier to call than this one. You start Christian McCaffrey, the RB1 on the year, the best asset in fantasy football. You start Travis Etienne, RB3 on the year, despite already having his bye week, has scored a touchdown in 4 straight games and has 7 total touchdowns in those last 4 matchups. You start those guys, you don't think about anyone else, and you move on with your day. It doesn't matter that both of these defenses are very good against the run. It doesn't matter. These are superstar running backs. All right, the sixth matchup we'll look at is the Saints at the Vikings. How about Josh Dobbs taking down Arthur Smith for the entire fantasy community? You'll love to see it. But as far as the running backs go here, Alvin Kamara is a must start. You don't think about starting anyone else. It was a strange week last week for Kamara. I hear you guys, but this should be a bounce back. There are few running backs that I trust in PPR leagues over a guy like Alvin Kamara, who, by the way, is on track to see 114 targets despite missing 3 games already in 2023. That is insanity. But we're not starting anyone else in that backfield. You guys know that. As far as the other side of the ball, Alexander Mattison. Here is the tough thing with Mattison. There is clearly now no competition. Cam Akers tore his other Achilles, really unfortunate. But Mattison will now step into a lot of opportunities. But I still believe you can only play him depending on good matchups. So, for example, this matchup against the Saints, they have been a very good run defense in the last 10 years, and that has continued this year. At the moment, they give up the 7th fewest points to fantasy running backs, 26th in points allowed. So this is really not a player I would like to start. I would say 60 to 70% of people have a better option on their roster. But if you're desperate, you could consider him a desperation play purely based on the offense he's a part of. It looks pretty good. The fact that there's no one competing with him for touches, and the fact that he's likely their goal line running back. So has been extremely inefficient. It's a terrible matchup. I prefer not to start him, but you'll have to make that decision based off your best options. Now, of course, you can comment down below. Let us know what kind of situation you're dealing with this week, and hopefully someone in the community can do their best to reply as we do as well. All right, the 7th matchup we're going to look at here, guys, is the Packers at the Steelers. 37.5 point over under here, and the Steelers are favored at home. This is the 2nd lowest over under of the week, and it makes sense because the Packers are falling on their face, and the Steelers are only winning games because of their defense. It's definitely not because of Kenny Pickett. That's for damn sure. But let's start with the Packers side of the ball. I think we can absolutely start Aaron Jones with confidence now. He is a must start for me. Last week, this is what I've been saying for multiple weeks. I've been saying I still believe he's a talented player. I still believe he's their best running back. And I believe there will be a point where they let him loose. Now, last week, we got that exact report from Matt LaFleur. He literally said, we're going to cut him loose this week. And oh boy, did they do that in week 9, guys. He played a season high 57% of the snaps. And more importantly, he had 26 total touches, his most this year by far. He got into the end zone. They used him in the air. They used him on the ground. Aaron Jones is back, baby. And you can absolutely start him in this matchup versus the Steelers, who give up the 7th most points to running backs. That guy can go into your lineup with confidence again this week. Believe in the talent, baby. You just need to get healthy. As for A.J. Dillon, that's not a player we ever want to start when Aaron Jones is healthy, and honestly, when he's not healthy either. But as far as the Steelers side of the ball, this is the same story every week. There is nothing new to report other than Najee has been better. Najee's been better technically. I mean, has he turned it around? I don't really know if we could say that, but he has been better. In the first 5 weeks, Najee was averaging 6.5 points per game. And now in the last 3 games, he's averaging a respectable 13.5 PPR points per game. Now, Najee is not going to win anyone their matchup. It's a great matchup versus the Packers. They allow the 10th most points to running backs, but it really doesn't matter for this group. Najee is not going to be the reason that you win your matchup. However, you can start him, and he at least probably won't tank your week. So look at him as a floor play. At least the touches are there, and at least he's getting into the end zone recently. As for Jaylen Warren, he has really carved out a role for himself, and he's actually looked better than Najee Harris. I think we can all agree. But the unfortunate part of Jaylen Warren, just the reality with this player, is he is never going to make Najee Harris irrelevant. This is not a Melvin Gordon, Austin Eckler, Los Angeles Chargers situation, unless Najee holds out, that is. But Jaylen Warren is not going to make Najee Harris irrelevant while Najee Harris is there. That's just the reality. It's just not going to happen. He's been the more consistent player in fantasy, though, between the two of them. In 5 of his 8 games this year, he scored over 10 PPR points. So these are both floor plays that you can play if you're in a tough position. but you really shouldn't expect them to win you your week or be the reason you win your week in fantasy. All right, the 8th matchup we're going to look at here is the Titans at the Bucks. The Will Levis experiment continues. 38.5 point over under, and the Bucks are favored at home. What a game they had last week versus the Texans. That was crazy. But this is a very, very simple matchup, similar to the Jags and the 49ers. You start Derrick Henry with confidence. You don't think about it. He is still the focal point of their offense. He's getting plenty of opportunities, and he's also being utilized in the air. Now, this year more than any, Derrick Henry does have bust potential because of Tajay Spears' role, but still, you got to start him. Sometimes he's going to bomb your week. Sometimes he's going to win you your week. So you just have to be okay with that. As for the Bucs side of the ball, the Titans were pretty poor last week versus the Steelers. Najee and Jaylen Warren had very good weeks in fantasy, and they faced the Tennessee Titans defense. The Titans currently are 19th in points allowed to running backs. So it's not the best matchup. It's not an ideal matchup, but we have seen, similar talents like a Jaylen Warren be good for fantasy against this defense. So you can start Rachaad White. Rachaad White is a better start in PPR formats. The volume is there. He's getting worked in the air. He's the RB11 on the year. So he is almost guaranteed to get you over 10 PPR points. Okay, the 9th matchup we're going to look at here is the Falcons at the Cardinals. This is the start of the afternoon slate, and Kyler Murray is back. I don't know about you guys, but I am so excited to see Kyler Murray out there. I'm a fan of his. There's some haters out there. That's okay if you're a hater, but I'm a fan of his, and I'm excited to see him back out there. This is great for the entire Cardinals offense. Let's start with James Conner, who could be back. At the time of recording this video, I do not know if he is back, but if he's playing in this game, you absolutely can start him, and I would label him a must start. Do not forget how good James Conner was before his injury. You could consider this a buy low as well if you want to go buy some James Conner. But let's look at what he looked like from weeks 1 to 4 before that injury. He was averaging 18 touches a game, 87 yards per game, 13.7 PPR points, and he was RB16 in fantasy football in that time span. And while this is a tough matchup, the Falcons are 25th in points allowed to the position. We saw Conner perform well against the Cowboys in week 3, which is an even more difficult matchup for running backs. He put up 19 points against the Cowboys that week. So we know Conner can overcome bad matchups. Now, if James Conner doesn't play, there's not a running back that you want to start here, regardless of who it is. It doesn't matter if DeMarco's back. Definitely not Keontae Ingram. You don't start anyone else. As for the Falcons side of the ball, I know it has been absolutely rough. It has been so difficult, and no one dislikes Arthur Smith more than me. I'm just going to be honest with you. The way that he approaches the game plan, the way that he belittles people who are questioning his methods, it's quite frankly, it's kind of, what's the nice way to say this? There's not a nice way to say it. So if you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything at all. But you're not smarter than everyone, Arthur. You're not smarter than everyone. You drafted a generational running back, the best running back since Saquon Barkley, prospect, that is, the best prospect since Saquon Barkley. You drafted him in the top 10 of the NFL draft. And in the past 2 weeks, you have given his backup, Tyler Algier, more opportunities and more opportunities each game. It is so frustrating. I don't understand it. However, I do believe Bijan has a bounce back this week. It is a fantastic matchup for him to get back on track. The Cardinals give up the 3rd most points to fantasy running backs, so Bijan could be in your lineup, absolutely. He's going to perform better than he's performed in the last couple weeks. I'm putting him to my lineup with confidence. If he fails us versus the Cardinals, then we have to start asking some serious questions. As for Tyler Algier, I do believe he's in play. I do believe he's in play in deeper formats. In smaller formats, no. But in deeper formats, you can consider him. I more want to play him in like a DFS lineup, though, if I'm honest with you. All right, the 10th matchup we're going to look at today. This should be an incredible game. This is the Lions at the Chargers. 48.5 point over under. The Lions are favored away. Isn't that crazy? Highest over under of the week. This should be a great game for fantasy. And the good news for David Montgomery owners is he is going to be back and in this game. And I guess that's probably bad news for Jahmyr Gibbs owners. But here's the deal. Jahmyr Gibbs has absolutely earned more respect and earned a larger role in this offense. However, David Montgomery, it's my opinion that he is still the heartbeat of this offense. Do not be surprised if David Montgomery has 15 to 20 touches in this game. Do not be surprised if he's still the goal line back. Do not be surprised if Jahmyr Gibbs comes back down to about 12 to 15 touches per game. Regardless, you can start both of these guys. The Lions backfield is always giving you a huge amount of fantasy points. And if they can split it across the board, both of these guys will be very good starts in a game where there could be a potential shootout. So start both of these guys, and Gibbs, you feel with Gibbs, you feel a little bit better about him in a PPR format. But regardless, both of these guys need to be in your lineups. And you'll probably be frustrated if you own Gibbs when Monty's taking those goal line touches, but you got to think about it from an NFL perspective. This team is better when both of these guys are handling the load together. And as for the Chargers, it's very, very simple. You start Austin Eckler, and you don't even consider anyone else. Austin Eckler's getting back on track. Another buy low for us a couple weeks ago. Hopefully you did, because he is fantastic. All right, the 11th matchup we're going to look at. This is an NFC East rival, but it's not going to be much of a rival game this week, is it? Giants at Cowboys. This is a 39-point over-under. The Cowboys are favored, of course. This is the largest spread of the week, 15.5 points, which means that Vegas is telling us the Cowboys are going to absolutely dominate this game. And I kind of agree with him, and it's why I'm excited about Tony Pollard. Tony Pollard has been a disappointment. There is no doubt he's been a disappointment. However, we have a talented player who is playing a high percentage of snaps on a good offense that is figuring things out. There is positive regression on the way for Tony Pollard, specifically in the touchdown category. I know you might be screaming at me right now. You might be commenting, you're an idiot if you're starting Tony Pollard. I don't care. In 12-man formats, Pollard needs to be in your lineup unless you have clear superstars that would obviously be above him. For example, in my home league, I have Tony Pollard. My next best option is Kareem Hunt. 100% Tony Pollard is going straight into my lineup this week. Good games are ahead, guys. We have told you this about so many players. Told you this about Mixon. Told this about Rachaad White, Austin Eckler. Good games are ahead for Tony Pollard. Do not lose faith. He will bounce back, I believe, in this game. The Giants give up the 6th most points to fantasy running backs, so it's a great matchup to do it. And the Cowboys should be up a lot in this game. As for the Giants, Saquon is a must-start as well. It's a bad matchup, 100%, but we know how talented Saquon Barkley is, and the type of usage he's receiving, you just can't sit a guy with that talent and that volume. Since coming back from injury in week 6, he's averaging 28.8 opportunities a game. Guys, Saquon is almost seeing 30 touches a game since coming back from injury. That is ridiculous. You cannot sit a guy with that talent and those opportunities. The 12th matchup we're going to look at is the Commanders at the Seahawks. There is a 45.5 point over under, and the Seahawks are favored at home. Now, I do believe the Seahawks get back on track versus this Washington Commanders defense. Let's start in Seattle because there is some nuance. There is some discussion to be had about this backfield. Ken Walker, Zach Charbonnet. A big reason I was nervous about Ken Walker coming into this year was because I believed at some point Zach Charbonnet was going to become an issue. Not that he was going to take over the backfield, but he would become an issue, and eventually these guys might cancel each other out. That was my concern. Now, I don't want to overreact too much to a 2-game sample size, but if it's 3 games, we'll start to see this as a trend rather than a flash in the pan. Keep in mind, guys, for Ken Walker, I'm labeling him a must start. Let's talk through this. In week 8, you're saying, what happened in week 8 then? What happened in week 8? He played 41% of the snaps. Well, he was dealing with an injury. That's what I'm chalking week 8 up to. In week 9, it was his second week playing less snaps than Zach Charbonnet. There's 2 ways we can look at this. We can look at it as, okay, Charbonnet is now a 50% owner of this backfield. The other way that we can look at it is, okay, the Seahawks were down this entire game. They were getting obliterated, and Charbonnet is the better pass catcher. Therefore, he played more percentage of the snaps. Those are the two ways you can look at it. Now, if in week 10 rather, if we have 3 weeks in a row with Ken Walker completely splitting this backfield and not getting a higher amount of touches, it will officially be time to push the panic button. However, with this matchup versus the Commanders, they give up the 17th most points to running backs, so they're middle of the pack. But I believe Seattle is a superior team, and I believe they will be able to be effective offensively, including more goal line opportunities for Ken Walker. So I'm going to label Ken Walker a must start, but I am very close to hitting that panic button. In fact, I would already say if you're an 8 or a 10-man league, you probably might have a more reliable option on your roster already. But any 12-man league and above, Ken Walker is likely still your best option. Zach Charbonnet, even though he's getting half of this backfield, there's not a single week this year you would have wanted to start him for fantasy. So there's no way I can advise anyone to start him either. But yeah, definitely concerning. Definitely concerning with Ken Walker. And it's not helping that the coaching staff is, specifically Pete Carroll, falling in love with Zach Charbonnet. So I don't have much Walker this year. I can't emotionally connect to the feeling of those people who do. But we have got to monitor that situation because it is getting very, very sticky. As for the Commander side of the ball, Brian Robinson is a spot start. I wouldn't label him a must start despite this being a fine matchup because touchdowns are really saving his fantasy weeks. If you look at his entire year, without touchdowns, he would only have 1 week over 10 PPR points. But the good news is he is their touchdown guy. He is their goal line option. So if the Commanders have an opportunity on the goal line, Brian Robinson always has a chance to get into the end zone. Again, the issue is if he doesn't score a touchdown, he is not going to give you a good fantasy week. So keep that in mind as you consider him. And as far as Antonio Gibson goes, this is just not a guy that you can comfortably start. That's just the reality of the situation. All right, the 13th matchup we're going to look at is the Jets at the Raiders. This is Sunday Night Football. Over under of 37 points, which is the lowest over under of the week. And if you watch the Jets on Monday Night Football, it makes sense. It makes sense why this is the lowest over under the week. This is a very simple matchup, so we won't take long. You start Breece Hall, you start Josh Jacobs. Breece Hall is an absolute superstar. He is electric every time he touches the ball, and he's getting volume. You start him. Josh Jacobs is getting volume. And with this new coaching staff, the first time that they had their new coach, he ran the ball 26 times. You start Josh Jacobs, and you don't overthink it. The last matchup we'll look at is Monday Night Football. The Broncos at the Bills. Over under is 47 points, and the Bills are favored at home. So this is how I'm looking at this matchup. Let's start with the Broncos. Javonte Williams is absolutely a must start in my eyes. The last time out, the Broncos unleashed Javonte Williams. He played a season high 63% of the snaps and had 30 total opportunities. Buffalo, meanwhile, his matchup allows the third highest yards per attempt to opposing running backs, the third worst mark in the NFL, which means that Javonte could have a very efficient day, and if he's given volume, he could definitely return for a good fantasy day. The Bills sound like a bad matchup, but they're actually a pretty good one for running backs on the ground. As far as the Bills go, I cannot in good conscience label James Cook a must start anymore. I just do not think that we can do that. You know, hasn't had over 10 PPR points in the last 2 games. And if you look at his last, let's look at his last 5 weeks, guys. In his last 5 weeks, he's had over 9 points once. He's not the focal point of their offense. That's unfortunate. This was my concern heading into the year as well with James Cook is, would he ever be a workhorse? He's just not a workhorse. He's an option for them. He's not the guy that they scheme the offense around. He's an option. He's an efficient player. He's good in the passing game, but he's an option. That's the unfortunate part. Now, the good news is if you have James Cook and he's your best option, this is a good matchup. The Broncos allow the second most points to fantasy running backs, but I would say they've been better recently. You know, the matchup against the Dolphins really skews how good or how bad this defense is. They give up 95 PPR points to the Dolphins in 1 week. That is going to skew the way the Broncos look in fantasy matchups. So I definitely believe that James Cook is good enough to return fantasy points. It's a good enough matchup. He's on a good enough offense. However, he has not been good for fantasy, and we don't even know if Leonard Fournette is going to, demand a role now that he's going to get involved. So if James Cook is your best option, you can start him, but I don't think James Cook is ever going to be the reason someone wins their week. He's going to give you a safe floor, though. So those are all the matchups this week. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Do me a huge favor and hit that like button for me to show some support. And if you guys want to show some additional support to this channel, you can go ahead and use our promo code LAND. Signing up to the Flock Fantasy website, you'll get a bunch of perks in return. My weekly rankings, rest of season rankings, dynasty rankings for one quarterback, for Superflex leagues, the best articles in the industry from the best team in the industry, and a bunch of other exclusive perks. So feel free to DM us if you sign up. Check out the pinned comment for more details and enjoy the rest of your day. Go get a win here in week 10. Now that those idiots are done talking, who needs some rankings?
Hell yeah, I need some rankings.
Then use promo code LAND, L-A-N-D, for 30% off any membership at flockfantasy.com.
Oh.
It's so easy. Even your grandma could scan that QR code right there.